Hey y'all, and welcome back to my channel. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make this charcuterie, I think I said that right, probably not, display board. This would not be used for any sort of foods or anything like that, since we are putting epoxy over the entire board. Now, I know that I'm going to be asked this question, so I'm going to go ahead and knock this out. Yes, it can be used for cold foods if you are using a food safe epoxy. You do not want to put any sort of alcohol cleaners on this. You don't want to soak it in hot water, and you absolutely do not want to cut into it, such as using it as a cutting board or put hot foods on this. My suggestion is to basically sell these as a display or some sort of home decor rather than a cutting board that has a design on it. Hopefully that makes sense, but there's pretty fine lines that you don't want to cross whenever putting foods on something that does have epoxy on it. And you want to make sure that you get that message across to your customers so they can safely use their item. The board that we're using is from Hobby Lobby, but I have seen them lots of places, especially the discount stores like Marshall's, TJ Maxx, Burke's, you name it, lots of places have these, and a pretty decent price as well. I applied a pretty generous coat of the Folk Art Crackle Medium all over this board. I did get it a little bit too thick in some areas, so that's why I'm going back over it with my brush to spread it out just a bit, and then I'm going to dry that up with my heat gun. You want to allow it to completely cool before you start adding on your paints. If your surface is really warm when you add on your paint is automatically going to start drying and crackling. So you do have to work really quickly, as you see I am here. Try to avoid going over the same area multiple times. If you must, then definitely make that a very quick brush stroke and try to avoid going in areas that you can see are already crackling. If they're starting to crackle, that means your paint is starting to dry in that area, and if you go over it again, it is going to cause it to smudge and it's not going to crackle correctly in that area. So once we have our entire board painted, I'm going to go over with my heat gun and apply some direct heat so that it can really get that crackle going and get some areas pretty separated in there. I'm going to give this plenty of time to just sit and dry completely, and then I'm going to go in with a little bit of sandpaper and go over my edges to separate the paint from the edges of my board. I want to get a really good seal with my epoxy on those edges, and I also want it to look a little bit rustic, so I'm going in with 320 and 80 grit to rough those up just a bit and get all of that paint off of those rounded sides. Once I finished sanding my edges and roughing it up just a little bit, I went over with a very damp cloth to get any of that dust off, allowed that to dry for a couple of minutes, and then we're going to go in with a little extra incorporated fast set epoxy turbo. We're going to add in angel dust from PDB Creative Studio to give this whole board a beautiful shimmer. Now, I've talked about a little extra incorporated turbo a couple of times in my past tutorials. This is another good opportunity to really tell you the things that I like about this epoxy versus others that I have used in the past. So not only does the Turbo Fast Set have a incredible shine, honestly, it might even be shinier than their regular epoxy, and that's hard to beat. But it also gives you a longer work time than any other fast setting epoxy that I have tried. And I believe I have tried them all. You still get the quick 2 to 3 hour dry time, of course, depending on your temperature and humidity in the area that you're working, but it does work very well in all climates. It is incredibly hot and humid here in North Carolina, and I have absolutely no issues with bubbles or fish eyes. And with the work time of a regular epoxy, it also gives me the ability to do large projects like this with a fast setting epoxy and not run out of time before it starts setting up and end up with lots of micro bubbles. And I can also work on multiple tumblers at once. If you saw one of my previous videos where I worked on my Mother's Day tumblers, I was actually epoxying 12 to 15 tumblers at one time using one single cup of epoxy. I was mixing 140 to 170 milliliters of this and still having plenty of time to epoxy every single cup and then run over with my torch before this started setting up, and it still dried within 2 to 3 hours. And from the raw materials, the mixing in-house of their epoxy to the bottles that they use to bottle them in. It's all USA made and supporting other small businesses in the United States. So what is not to love about that, right? Alright, so once my epoxy had dried completely, I grabbed my white element sheet from Gracefully Created, cut out all of these elements, and I'm just going to place them all over the board so I can kind of map out where I want everything before I start applying them. Once I have everything in place, I'm going to use the hinge method to apply these to the board. And you do want to make sure that you are pressing these down really, really well. You want to get all of those little bubbles out from underneath your vinyl and press down to the surface so the edges and the clear portion of the decal does not show once you apply the epoxy. To do that, I'm using my squeegee tool to apply the larger ones, and then after I press the smaller ones down by hand, I'll go back over them with the squeegee to really make sure that they're stuck down and none of those edges are going to appear lifted once my epoxy is applied. Once you have pressed your decals down really well, there's no need to seal. You can go right in to adding in your final coats of epoxy. And when you're epoxying a board or a tray that does not have like raised edges, the key to keeping your epoxy on top of that board is to go to the edge but not over the edge. You can do that by kind of getting a bubble of epoxy and brushing it all the way to the side but not over it. If you have a stream of epoxy that does start to go over the side, immediately take either a clean glove or a baby wipe, something to wipe it up to the edge and prevent it from going over again. I brushed over with my torch and then sat this to the side. I did place a large box on top of it to prevent any dust particles from getting to my board. As my board was drying, I went ahead and made my bow. I am not a professional bow maker. I honestly have absolutely no clue what I'm doing. I just repeatedly make a bow until it looks the way that I like. And this was my third attempt. So I'm just gonna let y'all watch and try to follow along. If you think it looks nice, I just made some loop-de-loops with the ribbon, cut the tips at an angle, and hope for the best. Yeah, so all of my ribbon come from Hobby Lobby, and the greenery that you see to the side is just a couple of sprigs off of a vase of fake flowers that I have in my home, and those are also from Hobby Lobby. Once my board was cured, then I added on my bow by just tying the ribbon in the back. I wanted this to be removable, and I just tied a nice little bow with that excess ribbon on the back side, and this board was complete. I cannot say how much I love the way that this turned out. Love how a little extra incorporated epoxy looks on large projects like this, and this is my favorite spot to take a video because it makes the most beautiful reflection of the flag we have on our front porch, and just made the final video of this patriotic project even better. I am going to keep this one for myself. I'm excited to have it on display in my home. I hope that y'all have enjoyed this tutorial. We are going to be giving away a little extra incorporated epoxy over in the Brittany Barnes Boutique Epoxy Tumblr art group, so make sure you head over there to join and go ahead and give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. All materials I have used will be listed in the description below with some discount codes for you. That is all for today. Thank you all so much, and we will see you next time.